The night the city bowed to power, money, and glittering champagne towers, the most powerful man in the room couldn't even get a table. On New Year's Eve, every restaurant in Manhattan shimmered like it was carved from diamonds. Crystal lights reflected off polished floors, violins played near windows overlooking fireworks barges waiting on the river, and couples dressed in black tie whispered promises about fresh beginnings. And outside the most exclusive restaurant in the city, a black Rolls-Royce idled at the curb. Inside it sat Adrien Laurent, billionaire CEO, tech visionary, media darling. At 39, he owned half the skyline and most of the headlines. His company had just closed the largest merger of the decade. Business magazines called him the man who never loses. But tonight, he was losing to a clipboard. "I'm sorry, sir," the hostess repeated, her smile professionally apologetic. "We're completely booked." Adrien blinked, certain he'd misheard. "I don't think you understand," his assistant whispered sharply, stepping forward. "Mr. Laurent is a personal acquaintance of the owner." "I understand," the hostess replied softly. "But every table is seated. Even the owner is at capacity." Adrien felt something unfamiliar curl in his chest. Rejection. He wasn't used to doors closing. His name opened skyscrapers. Investors waited weeks for 5 minutes of his time. Yet here he stood, watching couples brush past him into warmth and laughter while the January wind bit at his tailored coat. "Let's go somewhere else," his assistant muttered, but everywhere else was the same. Every fine dining room had a waiting list longer than the year that was ending. By 11 p.m., Adrien dismissed his driver. "I'll walk," he said. His assistant hesitated. "Sir, it's New Year's Eve." "I know." He needed air. Or silence. Or something that didn't feel like a mirror reflecting his solitude, because the truth was this: he had nowhere else to be. His penthouse would be empty. His phone would buzz with automated greetings and carefully crafted business wishes. His ex-wife was spending the night in Aspen with someone younger and more spontaneous. His parents had passed years ago. Friends had slowly become competitors, then acquaintances, then LinkedIn connections. He had built an empire and somehow misplaced his life. The sidewalks were alive with countdown energy. Street vendors sold blinking glasses shaped like the coming year. Groups laughed too loudly. A child in a puffy red jacket held his father's hand, pointing up at skyscrapers as if they were constellations. Adrien stopped walking. He didn't know why. Across the street, tucked between a closed laundromat and a convenience store, stood a small diner. Its neon sign flickered imperfectly. The windows were fogged. Inside, it looked full, but not glamorous. Just warm. He almost kept walking, but the cold had seeped through his coat, and the idea of sitting alone in a marble penthouse felt heavier than the winter air. He crossed. When he opened the door, a bell chimed overhead. The scent of coffee and grilled onions wrapped around him. Every booth appeared occupied. A waitress with tired eyes approached. "Sorry, honey. We're full." "It's a big night." Adrien gave a small nod. "Of course." He turned toward the door, and then, "Hey." The voice came from the back corner. Adrien looked up. A man in his mid-30s stood from a booth, one arm raised in a friendly wave. His other arm rested around a little girl with curly hair and a paper crown slightly too big for her head. "You can sit with us," the man called. "We've got room." Adrien froze. The entire diner seemed to pause. The waitress smiled. "See? New Year's miracle." Adrien hesitated only a second before walking over. "I'm Daniel," the man said, extending a hand. Adrien. Daniel's grip was firm but warm. No recognition flickered in his eyes. No awe. No calculation, just kindness. "This is Lily," Daniel said. The little girl grinned shyly. "Hi." Adrien slid into the booth across from them. The table was simple: 2 milkshakes, 1 plate of fries, and a single slice of chocolate cake with 2 forks. "Celebrating big?" Adrien asked, glancing around. Daniel chuckled. "Big enough for us." Lily nodded seriously. "Daddy said we don't need fireworks if we have cake." Adrien felt something shift inside him. The waitress brought an extra menu. "You sure?" Adrien asked quietly. "I don't want to intrude." Daniel waved the concern away. "Nobody should be alone tonight." The words landed harder than Daniel could have known. They talked at first, politely. Safe topics. Daniel worked 2 jobs, construction during the day, delivery driving at night. Lily was 6. Her favorite color was yellow. She loved drawing stars because they look like tiny promises. Adrian found himself smiling. Not the controlled, meteorite smile he'd perfected, but something unfamiliar and unguarded. "Where's Lily's mom?" Adrian asked gently. Daniel's expression softened. "She passed 3 years ago. Car accident." Lily reached for his hand instinctively. Adrian swallowed. "I'm sorry." Daniel nodded. "We had plans. Big ones. But life," he shrugged lightly. "Life rewrites things." Adrian stared at the condensation on his water glass. Life rewrites things. He thought about the nights he'd chosen boardrooms over dinners. Deals over date nights. Growth over presence. He had rewritten his own life too, into something efficient and profitable but empty. "You married?" Daniel asked casually. "Divorced." Daniel nodded once, understanding more than the word conveyed. The diner's old television above the counter began broadcasting the countdown from Times Square. 10 minutes to midnight. Lily climbed onto the seat to see better. Daniel leaned toward Adrian. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. You look like someone important." Adrian nearly laughed. "What does that mean?" "It means," Daniel said carefully, "you look like a man who carries a lot. But you're here alone." No accusation. Just observation. Adrian stared at him. "I built a company," he said slowly. "From nothing. I told myself that once I made it, I'd have time." Daniel nodded again. "And?" Adrian exhaled. "There's never enough time." The TV began the final minute countdown. Lily squeezed between them now, grabbing both their hands. 30 seconds, she shouted. Daniel looked at Adrian. "You know, I couldn't afford reservations anywhere fancy. But Lily wanted to stay up. So we made it special in our way." Adrian's throat tightened. He had spent millions making nights special for shareholders, but he couldn't remember the last time he'd made one special for someone he loved. 10. The diner joined in. 5. Lily squeezed harder. 3. Adrian felt something crack inside him, not painfully, but like ice breaking under spring sun. 2. He looked at Daniel and Lily. 1. "Happy New Year." Cheers erupted. The diner filled with applause. Someone blew a party horn too loudly. Lily threw her arms around her father. Then, impulsively, she leaned across the table and hugged Adrian too. He stiffened, then melted. "Happy New Year," she whispered. It was the first genuine wish he'd received all night, and somehow, it felt like the only one that mattered. After midnight, as people began drifting out into the streets, Adrian remained seated. Daniel glanced at the bill discreetly. Adrian noticed. He slid his black card across the table. Daniel frowned. "No, no. We invited you." "And I'm grateful," Adrian replied softly. "Let me return the favor." Daniel hesitated, pride flickering across his face. Adrian leaned forward. "Please. Not because I can. But because I want to." Something in his tone shifted the air. Daniel nodded once. Outside, snow had begun falling lightly. They stepped onto the sidewalk together. Lily gasped at the flakes. "It's like the sky is celebrating too." Daniel laughed. Adrian watched them, a quiet ache spreading through his chest. "Listen," he said suddenly. Daniel turned. "I run a company," Adrian began, the words feeling different now. "We're launching a community initiative this year. Scholarships. Support for working parents." Daniel's eyebrows lifted slightly. "I need someone who understands what it's like to actually struggle," Adrian continued. "Not someone who reads about it in reports." Daniel studied him carefully. "You offering me a job on New Year's Eve?" Adrian smiled faintly. "I'm offering you a conversation." Daniel looked down at Lily, then back at Adrian. "Okay," he said. They exchanged numbers, but something more had been exchanged too. Perspective. Over the next few weeks, Adrian did something radical. He slowed down. He visited job sites quietly, without press. He spent time understanding the lives behind statistics. He funded childcare programs and didn't put his name on the buildings. Daniel joined the initiative, not as a charity case, but as a consultant who spoke blunt truth in boardrooms that had long forgotten how to listen. Adrian began leaving the office before dark. He called his sister more often. He learned that wealth without connection was just noise. Months later, at the company's annual gala, Adrian stood on stage in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. Cameras flashed. Investors waited for projections and promises. Instead, he told a story. On New Year's Eve, he began, "I couldn't get a table at a restaurant. Polite laughter rippled, but a man with very little made room for me." The room quieted. He reminded me that success means nothing if you're celebrating alone. In the front row, Daniel sat beside Lily, who wore a simple yellow dress and waved proudly when Adrian glanced her way. Adrian smiled. "For years, I believed power opened every door," he continued. "But kindness opens the ones that matter." Applause rose slowly, then thundered, but Adrian's eyes weren't on the investors, they were on a little girl who believed stars were tiny promises, because that night in the diner, when a single dad stood up and waved, Adrian Lawrence's life had quietly pivoted, not because he gained something, but because someone with less gave him space, and in that space, he found what billions never bought him, belonging. As the gala ended, Adrian walked over to Daniel. "Table for 3 next New Year's?" Daniel teased. Adrian smiled. "No reservations," he replied. "Just cake." Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and unannounced, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful moments don't happen under chandeliers, they happen in small diners, with paper crowns, when someone chooses to make room. And that is how a lonely billionaire CEO learned that the richest life isn't built on what you own, but on who you sit beside when the clock strikes midnight.